Hello and welcome back to coverage of the Apex Gaming $5,000 Modern Open here in sunny Caldwell, Ohio. I'm Todd Tandy Anderson, joined by Elliot Rafsa. Hi, Elliot.
Hi, Elliot.
We have, I believe it was 76 players today battling out for their fair share of $5,000 in cash and prizes, as well as invitations to the regional championship hosted by Star City Games and the Apex Invitational next month. We are entering into round number 3, and we got a bit of a doozy for you. Blast from the past. We're going to be watching Autumn K on Merfolk. That's one we'll get to in just a second. Against Nick Cowden playing Grixis.
Yeah,
Grixis
Grixis
what?
Reanimator.
Okay.
So this is kind of the other Reanimator deck that's big in the format, other than Goryo's Vengeance. This one's a little more all in on the reanimation strategy. So instead of Goryo's Vengeance and Atraxa, the big bad to bring back is Archon of Cruelty with Persist, but also has Abhorrent Oculus to pair with Unearth as well for your Psychic Frogs and Emperor of Bones.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool like hybridization of two strategies, right? You got the Abhorrent Oculuses, and you play things like Thought Scour, so you can fill your graveyard, and then Psychic Frog kind of bridges the gap between being able to discard a big thing to put into the graveyard for persist, as well as just playing this like fair game plan that hinges around counterspells like Force Negation and actual counterspell.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is kind of the classic Thoughtseize Fatal Push suite of interaction as
Yeah.
well, coming from the Grixis player.
All right, so Grixis Reanimator fighting an old school strategy, one that I love dearly, and that's Merfolk from Autumn K. This is, a deck that's 30 plus creatures, all kind of revolving around the Merfolk creature type that has different lures that will buff them, give them flying, give them unblockable, give them island walk, things like that, and kind of using those with a few cheap counter spells, Flare of Denial in this case, and Ether Vial to cheat these creatures into play so you can kind of overwhelm quickly, and then playing a bunch of utility lands that make it hard for your opponent to interact with your stuff, Cavern of Souls to protect from counter spells, and Mutavault to give you some late game attacking. This deck looks pretty sweet. Flood Pitch Drowner is a 4 of, looks new. Main deck 3x Harbinger of the Seas, the Magus of the Moon variant for blue. And other than that, just a bunch of cheap ones and twos that you just try to cheat in with Ether Vial. So should be a pretty fun, interesting matchup. It'll be interesting to see if, just giving Island Walk to these creatures is enough to beat the Reanimator deck.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Merfolk's got a great matchup here.
Okay, yeah.
It's really, if Archon's able to hit the table early, that's kind of
That's
the
bad.
game over.
That's bad.
Flood Plus Downer can really help with that though, and the kicker, Autumn has come prepared with 4 main deck copies of Mistcaller.
Yeah.
Todd, can you tell us what Mistcaller
All right,
does?
we'll get it on the screen if we can, but Mistcaller is a 1 cost Merfolk, 1/1, and you can sacrifice it for no mana cost. And it says until end of turn, if a non token creature would enter the battlefield and it wasn't cast, exile it instead. And that's a perfect counter to things like Goryo's Vengeance and Persist.
Yeah, I mean that just kind of shuts off everything the Grixis Reanimator deck is trying to do.
Yeah.
And really, it's if that's on the battlefield, Nick has 4 cards in his deck that can remove it. Just the copies of Fatal Push, gonna be really hard pressed to fight through it.
Okay, well, the players are situated in the feature match area, so without further ado, let's head on down for round number 3. We're going to be watching the closer table. That's Autumn K on your right and Nick Cowden on your left. Autumn is the Merfolk pilot, Cowden on Reanimator. Turn 1 Thoughtseize for Cowden. Let's take a look at Autumn's hand. I see Ether Vial, Sink into Stupor, Island. Silvergill Adept. That one's Valdelian Hexcatcher, another Silvergill Adept, another Hexcatcher. So 2 pair.
Yeah, and this is a pretty strong draw for Autumn, I would say. Vidalian Hexcatcher, definitely a useful tool here against these more spell-heavy builds. And Nick's going to go ahead and take Autumn's kind of source of card advantage there in the Aether Vial, being able to deploy those threats quickly. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, I think the mana generation or effective mana generation of Ether Vial is its strongest attribute. Being able to play things at instant speed is good, but mostly you just have a high density of like ones and twos when you play Ether Vial, so that you just get to sit it on a cost and then just churn things out over and over.
Yeah, I mean, Autumn would have been able to start deploying threats with much greater frequency, and here we do see Psychic Frog coming down for Nick Cowden.
Yeah, and Frog is quite a strong threat here, especially on a dry board, but Already at 13 life is Nick Cowden, and only a few Merfolk attacks away with some Island Walk before those 13 life points become 0.
We will see the island deployed, and this will just be Silvergill Adept, revealing another one from hand. Pick up another card.
Yeah, and there's no information leak here with Silvergill Adept. Nick Cowden already saw all these cards, so just showing. Make sure you always show the ones that your opponent knows.
Yeah, and it looks like Nick's got a Fatal Push lined up for when he so chooses, along with a Thought Scour, a Persist, and a Faithless Looting. So really just looking for one of his big creatures to dump into the graveyard. At this point, it doesn't even really matter which one it is. It's primed to come back.
Okay, Cowden going to swing for 1. No block from Autumn, and we'll draw a card. Finds another Thoughtseize as Nick Cowden. A really nice grip. Going to start here with Faithless Looting, digging for one of those big baddies. Finds a Thought Scour and a land. Notably, the land enters tap. That's Raucous Theater.
Yeah, it does have another land in hand as well. So we'll see how aggressive Nick wants to be here. It looks like it's going to be Thought Scour and Raucous Theater hitting the bin.
Okay, Polluted Delta the land for a turn. Nick was really hoping to hit something like a Bornoculus or Archon of Cruelty to go with the persistent hand. Doesn't find it, so we're just going to play a little more interaction here. Here's the thoughts he's found. New cards here. Is that a Mistcaller? Is that top
No,
card?
that's Mindspring Merfolk.
So Mindspring Merfolk. Let's get that one on screen. So this is a 1-cost Merfolk. Doesn't have any abilities when it enters play, but it has exhaust for blue, X, and tap, and it says draw X cards. And then you put a 1/1 counter on each Merfolk creature you control. So pretty cool effect, especially on a 1-mana creature. Something to do when you're, overclocked with Ether Vial. You have like too much mana.
Yeah, not to mention, this is a nice card simply to activate for 0 as well. Just be able to, blue tap, put +1/+1 counters on all your Merfolk. Definitely no slouch. Definitely better with Aether Vial, of course, to be able to use that excess mana. But, sizing on these Merfolk often matter for closing the door in racing situations.
All right, so Cowden going to fetch Swamp and then pass turn back to Autumn. Do you know what the take was with the Thoughtseize? I did miss. Was that Civilian?
Yeah, I believe that was Civilian of Sea in the Sky.
Okay. Cavern of Souls, the land for Autumn, so Counterspell is no longer effective. All right, and we are going to play the Mindspring Merfolk.
Nick having another quick read there.
An attack for 2. Cowden going to take that 2 damage. Nope. Thinks better of it. We're going to fire Fatal Push at Silvergill Adept. Let's see if Autumn wants to respond. I thought I saw some Hex Catchers over there, so maybe it's worth throwing a Hex Catcher down and so you get to deal that 2 damage. But Autumn just going to let that one go and says, your turn, Nick.
Yeah, Autumn still has a pair of Hex Catchers in hand. Probably looking to deploy one of those on end step here, choosing not to fight over the Fatal Push. Nick is a little constrained on mana, and there's no reanimation target yet. So the fact that the Hex Catcher could catch a reanimation spell, Autumn's just valuing that a little more than fighting over a Fatal Push. Do you see Emperor of Bones picked up here for Nick, but he's going to start with a Thought Scour, targeting himself.
Alright, doesn't find a big baddie.
Yeah, Nick not being able to find any of the reanimation targets despite having the spells to bring the cards back is kind of left with options of either deploying this Emperor of Bones or we'll see what he does choose to do. It looks like it'll be Unearth on the Emperor that was milled.
Okay. Gonna hold up 2 mana here. Says go. Back to Autumn. Into turn. Here's that Voldaren Hexcatcher with Flash, and that's going to buff all the other creatures as well. Let's get Hexcatcher on the screen, because this one is relatively new, but still quite powerful in these strategies. Merfolk known for kind of swarming the board with little dinky guys that don't do a whole lot, but Hexcatcher allows you to sack any of those Merfolk to counter a non-creature spell unless the controller pays 1 as Flash, and all your other Merfolk get +1/+1, so it's a nice little buff.
Yeah, we see Nick being able to turn this Emperor of Bones into a 4/4 if he so chooses, just activating Adapt, even though it hasn't exiled anything yet. Um, Nick is at 10 life here, and so any island walking lord from Autumn is really what they would be looking to find here.
Yeah, Master of the Pearl Trident seems like it could be great. Lord of Atlantis, that looks like there's 6 of those lords that grant Island Walk.
It looks like it'll be 2 mana here for a Silver Gill Adept, revealing the other Hexcatcher that was known information. So another card coming for Autumn.
And passes the turn. Cowden going to fetch with Bloodstained Mire down to 9.
Yeah, and it looks like Autumn's valuing the ability here to simply deploy another Hexcatcher and then potentially activate the Mindspring Merfolk on their next turn to get them out of range. So Nick is at 9 if Autumn chooses to go for another Lord plus another activation, that could spell lethal very quickly. And just another persist picked up for Nick Cowden.
Yeah, kind of the downside of playing this like fair strategy is that you got fair cards, you got reanimate targets, and you got reanimate spells. And right now we've drawn the fair cards and the reanimate spells, but none of the reanimate targets.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I without a fifth land here and with the 2 mana reanimation in hand, Nick's in a bit of a bind. He can potentially flash back the Faithless Looting that should still be in the graveyard, and could find, say, another land plus a reanimation target and bring that back with either the Persist or the Emperor of Bones. But I think Nick is just looking for some more action here, so I wouldn't be surprised to see. All right, looks like we're going to start with a jump on the Psychic Frog.
Yeah, Cowden also aware of the Hex Catchers. Hex Catchers can easily disrupt Faithless Looting plus a reanimate spell.
For sure.
Alright, so Emperor Vrone is going to eat Zvulun.
Yep, and Autumn will fall down to 16 here. 2 more damage being dealt to her.
Autumn ready to deploy another Hex Catcher on the instep to make quite a wide and scary battlefield for Cowden, who's down to 9.
Cowden might be going for another Thoughtseize here, and knowing that there's another Hexcatcher in hand, this is a dangerous 2 life to be taking. Only one blocker is going to be, or sorry, 2 blockers will be available to Nick on Autumn's turn, because he can activate the Emperor of Bones on Autumn's turn and put Svellion into play.
Yeah. There's a Mutavault hanging out back there, though, so that means that 3 creatures are going to get through. Is 3 creatures enough to deal 7 damage with 2 Hex Catchers in play? I think so.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think Nick might just be dead on board.
Yeah, Autumn has enough to either just animate the Mutavault and swing all out, or animate and activate the Mindspring Merfolk, but that extra body attacking is likely more valuable than the pump at this point.
All right, Flare Denial going to be the take for Thoughtseize here from Cowden. And back to Autumn. Lethal on board. Let's see if she wants to pull the trigger. Going for it, I think, might walk headfirst into something like Fatal Push, but Nick been playing kind of tight to the vest. Autumn might be considering waiting a turn, especially if she drew another creature to play, like another Merfolk, so that we can play Silvergale Adept from hand and maybe that creature as well.
Yeah, it really just depends on how aggressive Autumn wants to be here. A single Fatal Push would represent taking quite a bit of damage off of the table. And it looks like it might be this Adept. Oh, it's Lord of Atlantis off the top.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good one there.
Yeah, you see Nick just laughing there. There's not much he can do about that one. That's basically going to make all of these Merfolk unblockable. And that's going to be a lethal attack here for Autumn, as she is going to take game one from Nick Cowden.
Now, Nick had a great start there. Opened with Thoughtseize, turn 2 Psychic Frog, but did not draw. The other half of the deck had a bunch of persists with nothing to do with it, an unearth. Didn't ever find Oculus, didn't ever find Archon. And honestly, Merfolk just did Merfolk things. Cast a couple of dorks and let them do all the work for you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a matchup, like I said prior to the match beginning, that I really do like from Autumn's side. Just the constant pressure, just enough disruption to sneak through, and we're off to game two.
All right, so we're going to take a look at the sideboards here. Let's start on your side with Nick Cowden. So Cowden playing this Grixis Reanimator strategy. What kind of stuff does he have to fight back against the Merfolk Menace?
All right, so we do see 4 Consigned to Memory, 2 Harbinger of the Seas, 2 Meltdown, 2 Mystical Dispute, 2 Pyroclasm, 1 Spell Pierce, and 2 Surgical Extraction available for Nick Cowden. Of those, the Mystical Disputes certainly are going to be coming in, as those are cheap 1-mana counter spells for anything that Autumn might present. Might also look to these Pyroclasms in conjunction with Fatal Push can clear up some of these wide boards that Autumn is able to present. I don't think there's much else coming in. Consigned to Memory might have a spot as it can deal with some of these problematic triggers, like from Floodpits Drowner or the like, but might be a little too narrow for inclusion.
Yeah. On the other side of the table, Autumn's Merfolk deck has 3 Consigned to Memory, 2 Dismember, 3 Engineered Explosives, 2 Force of Negation, 2 Mystical Dispute, a Relic of Progenitus, and 2 Stern Scolding. I guess in this matchup, you kind of want to prevent some graveyard shenanigans, so I like the Relic of Progenitus. A couple Mystical Disputes can help win counter wars, but also stop Psychic Frog. Not a big fan of Force of Negation. Those are more for anti-combo. Engine Explosives more for aggro decks and 0 mana, or decks with a bunch of zeros. Couple Dismember could be okay for killing Psychic Frog, but isn't even a guarantee. So really, I think it's just 1 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Mystical Dispute, maybe trim some of the weaker creatures in the matchup. Tishana's Tidebinder doesn't seem like it has that many great abilities. Yeah.
I actually think Autumn will look towards Stern Scolding as well.
Sure.
Being able to hit both Frog and Emperor of Bones is a pretty big deal, and especially being on the draw, having a 1-mana proactive answer to a Frog is kind of one of the ways that she can fall behind.
All right, as these players are shuffling up for game number 2, I'd like to take this time to thank some of our sponsors for Apex Con and this weekend's festivities. We're sponsored by Ultimate Guard, the industry leader when it comes to TCG supplies. From the Katana sleeves to the Archive deck box, check your local game store for Ultimate Guard products today. We are also sponsored by Once Upon a Galaxy. Blast off with Once Upon a Galaxy from the creators of Storybook Brawl and great Magic minds like Louis Scott Vargas and Matt Nass. Once Upon a Galaxy is a very deep auto battler that's free to play. You can play it on mobile right now in your app store, or you can find it on Steam. All right, players are just about ready, so let's head on down for game number 2. Cowden did lose game number 1. Should be on the play here. Going to lead off with Blood Crypt and a Thoughtseize, down to 16 already. A third color really seeming to hurt his life total.
Yeah, we do see Autumn boarded in the Dismember, or at least 1 copy here, so we do see that in her hand. Spelunician Sky, Mindspring Merfolk, two copies of Mindspring Merfolk, and Sink into Stupor as the other takes available. Not a very aggressive hand here from Autumn.
No, but Merfolk is kind of sneakily aggressive, right? Like, you just start by playing some dorks, and then eventually one of those lords comes off the top, and then your opponent's dead.
Yeah.
Just like we saw last game.
And I think we are going to see the Dismember being taken here.
Now, that's a sign to me that Cowden likely is going to be trying to play a Psychic Frog next turn. Either that, or that's just the most unique card in Autumn's hand.
Yeah, it looks like Cowden might have everything lined up here. I did see a Faithless Looting as well as an Archon of Cruelty. I think we're just missing the Persist. Kind of a land-heavy draw here from Cowden.
Yeah, it does have the blue source, but it's going to enter tapped. That's Undercity Sewers. I saw a couple of Swamps lying over there.
Yeah, and opted to keep the card on top, so it was an Emperor of Bones and a Pyroclasm as the 2 cards being picked up here.
Okay, and to note, we did keep a card on top with our Surveil before playing the Faithless Looting, so Cowden really likes one of those cards at his disposal. Going to pitch the Archon and an extra swamp. And now with Pyroclasm has a lot of cards covered from Autumn this turn.
And Lord of Atlantis was the pickup for Autumn. See how she does decide to play this. Odawara will be the land for turn, and the Lord hitting the battlefield here. This is a juicy spot to Pyroclasm if you're Nick Cowden.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. Like, obviously, if you have Reanimate Archon, maybe that's better. But I think Pyroclasm just being the clean 2-for-1, dealing with the Lord of Atlantis, it's too juicy to pass up.
Yeah, especially now you have perfect information if you're Nick Cowden. Or I suppose one card
One
less than
unknown.
perfect. Yeah, one unknown.
Autumn here, going to try to rebuild. Going to shock and sink into stupor. All right, so they're not shocks, right? They're 3 damage,
Yeah,
not
they're
2.
bolts.
So bolt. So do you want to say bolt in the sink into stupor?
Yeah. I don't know. What would you
Feels weird.
prefer?
I don't know.
Lava spike action.
Yeah, we're gonna spike in the sink into stupor.
It looks like Autumn does have a Tidebinder as the pickup.
Okay.
So this is a definitely interesting where you're actually going to want to Tidebinder the ability of one or more counters being put onto it, not even the adapt. Okay, it looks like Autumn's going to opt to Tidebinder the trigger that's going to exile the Archon to begin with.
I think that's okay. Cowden though says that's fine, and then gonna play persist, which he ripped for the turn. That's going to eat the Tidebinder, gain 3 life, draw a card. Autumn's gonna lose 3 life and discard a card. Let's get Archon of Cruelty on the table because it is a tough one to beat once it hits the battlefield, especially for a deck like Merfolk that doesn't have a whole lot of interaction.
Yeah, I mean, Archon of Cruelty's just become the premier non-legendary reanimation target across multiple formats. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, discards a card and loses 3 life. You draw a card and gain 3 life. Just a whole lot of value from entering the battlefield, and it'll continue to get value so long as it sticks around.
Yeah, seen play even in Legacy Reanimator, Archon of Cruelty from Modern Horizons is the premier non-legendary reanimate target. Here is Nick Cowden's turn, and the Archon triggering every time you attack 2 means that we're going to continuously accrue value. And Autumn in a really bad spot here in game number 2, but up a game.
Yeah, looks like we're just going to resolve an Emperor of Bones trigger here, and it'll exile Tashana's Tidebinder.
It's a nice one to get at instant speed. Archon here going to swing in for 5 and the 3 damage, so it's going to be 8 total coming in. Cowden also considering, I guess, putting in the Tidebinder and swinging in with Emperor of Bones and Tidebinder as well.
Yeah, looks like he just wants to get aggressive here.
Yeah, this looks like it's either a lethal attack or very close to lethal. 3 damage from the Archon's ability, and then we have 5, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yeah, this is threatening lethal, so it's going to force a chump block from Autumn. And I think that it's basically just game over here.
Yeah, I don't think Autumn's really got a way to come back, and she agrees. We're off to game number 3 here between Nick Cowden and Autumn Kuzma.
So that's what Cowden's deck was supposed to do, huh?
Yeah.
That's what it was supposed to do.
I think so. Like, it is named Reanimator, so I think it is looking to, reanimate some things.
All right. Okay, so players here are going to be shuffling up for game number 3. Not a whole lot should change between games 2 and 3. When you're playing against these Reanimator decks, you have a certain subset of sideboard cards that are just generically good against them, and a couple of main deck cards usually that are kind of bad against them. Most of the time it's like spot removal comes out against combo, discard comes out against aggro, that type of thing. So I don't think too much is going to change based on play draw. I think that the key for Autumn in game 3 is going to be trying to resolve like Ether Vial on turn 1. I think turn 1 Ether Vial just allows for so many like steamrolly type starts, especially if you draw multiple Silvergill Adepts.
Yeah, not to mention, Aether Vial just makes it so that Nick can't just relentlessly jam, Right. So
Yeah.
it's more, there's more flash threats. Nick still hasn't seen a missed caller out of Autumn,
Yeah.
and we know that Autumn does have the full four available to her. Imagine that coming in at instant speed in response to a persist.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
going to be tough to beat for sure. Nick Houghton's been pretty slow going about trying to set up the combo, though, opting for early things like Thoughtseize and removal spells instead of just playing Faithless Looting on turn one, trying to persist on two. Knows that you don't really need to play Persist Archon on turn two, it's just as good on turn three and four. You can kind of clear the way, so he's going to maybe take his time a little.
yeah, absolutely. We've seen a cautious approach so far from Nick, and it's served him well so far. Him being on the draw, though, for the first time in this match, is you might need to shift his stance a little bit. I
Yeah.
think the Psychic Frogs are not going to be at their best in this matchup. There's a lot of opposition. There's a lot of interaction for them with something like Floodpit's Drowner. So, we'll see what game three does look like here as our players are getting ready and drawing their opening hands. Let's go on down and see what they are going to be working with.
All right, Autumn going to be on the play. Let's see if her opener is good. Love to keep 7 against decks with Thoughtseize. I see that Relic of Progenitus. I see an Ether Vial, pair of islands, and
Yeah,
a quick
Autumn
heap.
very quickly keeps that hand. It looks like Nick might be working with only one land. Looks like one land double Thought Scour, Psychic Frog, Persist, Faithless Looting Archon.
Something like that. Now, this is important to know. Autumn going to go for turn one Relic of Progenitus instead of Ether Vial, and I think that's just a nod to the fear of Reanimate and the fear of getting yourself Thoughtseized.
Yeah, absolutely. Valuing the disruption over progressing her own board. And given the fact that Nick, I think, has cast something like four Thought Seizes across the other
Yeah.
games, really just showing us that she's valuing being able to interact with the main game plan that she would have a problem with otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, Cowden going to fetch Undercity Sewers, leaves that card on top. We're going to go back his way. Finds Fatal Push. That was the card he kept. And now we're going to jam something. Probably the Psychic Frog, since it's a threat that works well even in the face of Relic of Progenitus.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a point where Autumn, depending on the land that Nick gets here, I don't think he has a basic mountain in his list. This is a point where Autumn could potentially untap, put a counter on the Aether Vial, and slam a Harbinger of the Season to play if she has it, and that would basically lock Nick out of this game.
Yeah, there's some argument. Oh, and here's Mystical Dispute, a 1-mana counterspell for Frog. And now with Relic of Progenitus in play, it's going to be very hard for Nick to get a foothold in this game.
Yeah, I mean, if the follow up here is the Harbinger, that might be all she wrote.
Lights out.
Yeah. Looks like a couple Lords in hand for Autumn, maybe a Mindspring Merfolk as well, and just a pass back.
Yeah, going to use Flash Threats and Ether Vial, play really close to the vest, force Cowden to act first, and then respond in time. I think Autumn also did have one of those Mindspring Merfolk in hand, and so if the game gets like really attrition-y with fatal pushes and things like that, something like Mindspring Merfolk just seems so sick.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like Nick is potentially just going to go for a Faithless Looting line here. Persist the Frog, trying to get Autumn to use the Relic on something that isn't the Archon. We'll see if she takes the bait.
It's a pretty good bait though. Psychic Frog is quite annoying.
It looks like Autumn's hand is, I want to say, Flare of Denial, Lord, and the Mindspring Merfolk. So, doesn't have a great answer for the Frog if it does hit the battlefield, and it looks like she's considering just hardcast Force of Denial here. And that will be the play.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's really disciplined play from Autumn. Being able to put this Mindspring Merfolk onto the battlefield and then using the Aether Vial to deploy the Lord and drawing another card potentially off the Merfolk next turn is a big game.
All right. A couple more black cards for Cowden. Finds Persists Emperor Bones, I believe. We have a Fatal Push at the ready. The trick here is if you put any of your big things into the graveyard, that Relic of Progenitus It's just going to be left up for the rest of the game, basically, or eaten quickly.
Yeah, and there you see kind of the disparity between the Grixis Reanimator deck and something like Goryo's Vengeance, right? Goryo's Vengeance being an instant, whereas Persist is a sorcery, means that if you were on Goryo's, you could potentially set up a line where you could double Goryo's in response to a relic activation. No such line here available for Nick.
Okay, so relic to check reanimate spells. No psychic frog for Cowden. We have Mindspring Merfolk, which can be activated quickly, and we're going to deploy our first 2-drop of the game. And there's Master of the Pearl Trident. We're going to give +1/+1 to our Mindspring Merfolk, and it has Island Walk, and we're going to attack for 2.
What that signifies to me is that Autumn likes whatever card that she drew for the turn, right? I think that if she had drawn a weaker spell, she might have just wanted to use the exhaust ability on the Merfolk to pick up another card here. But it's going to be Emperor of Bones being deployed here for Nick Cowden, and this will almost certainly force Autumn to use the relic.
All right, so Ember Bones on the stack.
Looks like the last card for Autumn is actually another Flare of Denial.
If that's the case, we might just want to go ahead and crack. Well, I think the trouble here is the Relic of Progenitus needs a mana to clear the whole graveyard. Otherwise, it doesn't have that pinpoint disruption. And if Cowden plays this Emperor of Bones, and then it gets countered, and he has land plus persist, you just kind of lose the game if you're Autumn.
Yep.
So I think maybe wait for the Emperor to target something, and then you eat the whole graveyard in response. Yeah, Master of Pearl Trident down.
And you see Nick kind of just constantly checking Autumn with regards to the card in hand. I think Nick can kind of sense that that was another piece of counter magic. And Autumn is going to use the relic there. That relic should be exiled as well.
Yeah, it's not a sacrifice on that one. It's just exile it and all the graveyards.
Yes.
Fatal Push takes care of the Master, and graveyard is now gone. We're going to go back to Autumn. Ether Vial going to stay on 2. But shields are down. Cowden, if he's able to put a big baddie into the graveyard now, something like the Emperor of Bones or another Persist, could bring it back. We're going to cheat in Silvergate Adept and draw a card. Don't have to reveal anything on that one.
Yeah, and Autumn did pick up a Tishana's Tidebinder. I saw in hand there. And is just going to pass the turn back. I do like just this pass, especially because Autumn still has just activating the Mindspring Merfolk still available.
Oh, that one's not a sorcery speed one, huh?
No, that's you can activate that instant speed, but only once.
Yeah, the exhaust mechanic is quite interesting there. Thought Scour doesn't reveal anything threatening. Cowden going to main face fetch. Likely going to get a Surveillant to take one more look at the bottom if he doesn't have anything to do with that mana. And there it is, Undercity Sewer. We're going to surveil again. Wants to find Archon, wants to find a Born Oculus.
It does have a copy of a Born Oculus in hand. I'm not sure how many cards Nick's managed to put back into his graveyard. I think that's the 5th one. So it's looking for one more card to put into the graveyard to be able to hardcast the Born Oculus next turn.
Okay, Cowden. I think is Emperor Bones mandatory?
Yeah, I was just looking that up myself. I think
it is. And I think if there's nothing in the opponent's graveyard, I think you have to target something in yours.
No, it is up to 1. So,
Up to one,
yeah,
okay.
you can opt not to.
All right. Could come up if you were trying to cast Oculus, right? Okay, so in step, Autumn going to activate the Mindspring Merfolk, going to draw 1 card and put a counter on all her Merfolk. I'm going to go back her way for this turn, and Ether Vial going to tick up to 3. Reggie.
Yeah, that's got to signal a Tidebinder here if you're Nick Cowden.
All right, so Mindspring Merfolk is exhausted, did its job. Important to note, the Emperor Bones can just grow to a 4/4 with its adaptability, but with Tidebinder and Ether Vial at 3, that can get shut down. So I like attacking here. If you're Autumn, just send in with the Knuckleheads.
It looks to me like Autumn picked up a copy of Mystical Dispute. I believe that's the card uh, in the far right of her hand. And if that's the case, that's going to be huge this next turn, being able to basically time walk Nick if he goes for that Abhorrent Oculus. Does need to find another card to put into his graveyard if that's the case, though.
All right, attack for 5 coming. Cowden says block Silvergill.
And I think this might be Cowden just opting to make the Emperor a 4/4 for no real value, but Autumn's going to have the answer. Tidebinder on the adaptability.
Yep, and now the Silvergill does trade, but we get in 2 damage and clean up that creature. This does put card number 6 into the graveyard for Born Oculus. Autumn says go. Back to Cowden. Draws for turn. What do you find? It's Archon. Does he have a way to loot it into the graveyard?
Don't believe so. There's no Faithless Looting hiding out in the graveyard. His hands 2 copies of Persist, Archon of Cruelty, and Abhorrent Oculus. If that is a Mystical Dispute from Autumn, Nick is up against it here with no other real action.
Okay. There's Oculus. Meets Mystical Dispute. Countered for 1 mana. Autumn's marching in. 5 damage coming. Ether Vial going to stay on 3. It is. Cowden down to 4. Time running out.
Now, Nick is able to persist back this Abhorrent Oculus. We'll see if Autumn has another piece of disruption, just another Archon picked up. Persist number 1. Now be met with a Flare of Denial.
Okay. A second persist, and that one is going to resolve.
All right. Well, that means that Nick is going to be able to stabilize here. There will be a counter on that Oculus. We'll make sure that we can get that put on to accurately represent its size. It should be a 4/4.
Yep. Does get a -1/-1 from the persist. Good call. Now, on upkeep, the Suborn Oculus is triggering, but Autumn going to stop that ability with another Tishana's Tidebinder. Draws for turn. And now, important to note, the Oculus no longer has any abilities, right?
Yeah. Any future Manifest Dread is not going to happen so long as that Tishana's Tidebinder is on the table. Autumn's got 2 cards here. Any Lord would do it if it is one that grants Island Walk, but I think we would have seen Autumn slam that into play. Let's see if we can maybe catch a glimpse of what her hand is. Sink into Stupor on the Oculus, and that's going to do it. Autumn Kuzma takes this match 2-1 and moves to 3-0 here at the Apex $5,000 Modern Open.
Merfolk doing it. We're doing it.